Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the Column EDC Coffee Chat, Coffee with Colleen. We are really pleased to have our friend and partner, the attorney and city planner for the city of Forks, on with us this morning to talk about everything that's been happening over in the city of Forks, and they have some cool announcements. So, few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on chat, or not chat, on mute, so we don't.
Now you muted yourself.
No, it's not getting off to a good start this morning. Anyway, please keep yourself on mute other than me when I'm trying to talk, so that we don't pick up background noises. If you have questions during Rod's presentation, feel free to ask him. What we ask that you do is either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. We like this to be interactive, so please feel free to bring things up or make comments. So with that, Rod, thanks so much for joining us today. And this will be recorded and on our website later in the day. So with that, Rob, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, Colleen, and everybody. Thanks for joining. It's a great opportunity to be here. It's going to be a gorgeous summer day in Forks. It's going to be supposedly sunshiny, which means the vampires aren't available or they're sparkly, depending on how you want to look at that. And here to talk with you all about a couple things. I'm going to give a quick shout out to my niece whose 31st birthday is today. I doubt she'll be watching this, but happy birthday, Sierra. And a reminder that good things come over time, and time is a way to look at the measures of things. And so what do you want to talk about in Forks, Colleen?
Well, I don't know. Anything happening, Twilight or...
Well, I mean, of course, we have the Twilight Festival coming up. Lissy would be remiss if I didn't mention that in September. But I think we agreed with Mitch, we'd talk about the Forks Industrial Park. And
that's right.
So a little bit of a background there. The city of Forks owns approximately, the Forks Industrial Park was an effort by Rainier originally to create a parcel of land around 65 acres for industrial purposes on the west end. Started in the 1980s with that, and the city was involved as I heard it. I was in high school back then, so don't really know, but as I recall the story, the city was more engaged with that, and by 1994 became the owner of about 55 acres of that industrial property. And with a lot of help from Commerce and the federal government, there was an effort to build an industrial park and have a mill that would be leased by Portac. They were a firm out of Tacoma with a Japanese connection. And Portac was there for quite some time. Portac sold to Interfor. Interfor then operated the two-part mill out in the west end, one part being at Beaver, which was the main milling, log cutting milling operation, and then the Fork site was the planer mill and kiln operation. And that ran until 2014. Interfor closed their mill. Interesting enough, they had made it through the Great Recession. One of the things they were trying to do was expand the mill, and there had questions. Their financiers back in Montreal had questions about wood supply. And at the time, if you flash back to 2013, 2014, we were having yet again discussions with DNR and everybody about different rules and regulations. And so those things play on the market. It closed in 2014. The Allen Mill, down south of us in Jefferson County, closed in 2015. And with those two closures, we lost about 85% of our manufacturing sector that paid well over the median household wage out here in Forks. And so we started trying to find a way. Mayor Fletcher really wanted, so like, how do we use this? How are ways we can do this? Recompete came along, and so we highlighted the mill as part of that in the multi-jurisdictional effort, and it was a central element to that. We currently have a small custom cut mill operating on a small portion with a license, and our goal is to grow the facility. So with all that as a background, about 10 months ago or so, might be a little bit longer. We had an inquiry from a firm out of Canada, Riverside Forest Products, and a group of us started meeting with them, and they wanted to open a sawmill here in Forks at that site. The company has been in operations for almost 20 years in their Surrey site in Canada, and Rob Soai and his uncle are operating that, and Rob and his family have been involved with mill operations since 1995. After university, he started there. So then they had a lumber reman plant, which is where lumber comes into a plant from other mills and then gets modified in a way that might be for a specific type of contractor who needs grooves put into the lumber to where wire's going to go, things like that. So different ways to add to that, different planings, different edges, things like that. And then I've been operating a sawmill in Surrey since 2006. So we've been in discussions and negotiations with Riverside Forest Products USA, and with Rob as the owner of that. And not this Monday, the Monday before, our Forks City Council authorized the mayor and staff to proceed with a lease with Riverside Forest Products USA for a sawmill here at the Forks Industrial Park. We are in the final, everybody's checking the paperwork, making sure everybody's names are spelled right, the legal descriptions are right with that and there. And it is good news, but there's a lot of work to do. And there's been a lot of work to get to this point. Huge shout out to the EDC, Colleen and Mitch and Roy and Lori and everybody in there pretty much. We've had to call on some help there. An equally huge shout out to the Port of Port Angeles. I don't know if Paul's on, but his staff, Caleb and Catherine and some of the other folks have been out to the site helping us figure some of the needs and questions out because the site sat vacant for roughly 10 years and had some maintenance done up until like 2018, 2019 period, but there was a period in time where there was none, and I'll come back to that. And so we are really grateful for this opportunity and the work, the work is still going. Some things about what we are looking at coming to fruition there. It's over a $12 million capital investment that Riverside Forest Products is committed to make. They're already been purchasing and acquiring materials around the Northwest to make that happen and moving them on site. They're looking at 40 to 50 jobs in a single shift, but they'd like, their goal is to go to a double shift. And the unloaded average salary rate is $31.80 an hour. That is a huge, huge note to everybody. The median household income in Forks is $46,300. That is, in comparison to the state, is less than 50% of the state's median income. And these wages here are going to be probably $14,000 or more than that median income. So that's a pretty significant return of a manufacturing segment within our community that was lost with the closures a decade ago.
I just did the math, Rod, and it's $16,000 more than the median. So
yeah, and that's the unloaded average. That's the salary and benefits total is $36.45 average. So
that's great. That's really fabulous.
So that's huge.
Your people there really need it.
Yeah, and they're hoping to be at that double shift with 70 jobs. Then there are what I wouldn't call them secondary, and someday I'm going to get Doc Underwood and talking, because this is the primary at the site with Riverside, but there are also equally important jobs that aren't maybe necessary with Riverside. They're going to be associated and attached with that, the truck drivers and things like that, right? And to me, I still would call those as primary jobs, not secondary.
Well, so yeah, so they're induced from this work, but I think the big thing that everyone talks about, including EFM, who's the group that just bought
Rainier,
the
yeah,
environmental group that looks at, multiple ways of generating revenue from land, is that they need to be successful, they need to have infrastructure, and they consider that infrastructure loggers. They consider that infrastructure the truckers, and they too make really good wages.
right,
So the sector as a whole makes
right,
good wages, and the landowners can't be successful. The silviculturists can't be successful. The loggers can't be successful. The truckers can't if all the pieces of the process aren't running well. And
right,
it's been a real problem out west that
right,
all they could rely on was Interfor that only takes certain size logs.
right.
And so if they're bigger, they have to be trucked 200 miles away. That's not good for our environment.
Yeah.
And, we want to have value add here on the peninsula. Anyway,
No, no. I
sorry
mean,
to
right
jump
on.
in
Preach.
there.
Preach would be the phrase. And because I think folks lose sight of that, and I think that's been something you and I have been at board meetings, at political events where we're having to explain this to people and say, this is key and part and parcel of our economic base, our economic engine. What is really interesting when interacting with Rob and his colleague George, they're very wanting to make sure they're in engaged, understanding what we're having to do. We are understanding what they're having to do. We're trying to create basically a 40-year commitment. The lease is 10 years plus a group of additional renewals, and it's significant. Yeah, that everybody's trying to make sure we get it right as much as we can at the start. There are some things we got to do out of the property, and so we're going to be, as I was saying before we started, making a request to the Opportunity Fund for a loan grant combo. One of the interesting things is the park was built in 1994. And in 1994, I can truthfully say, because I've seen a picture, I had more hair. So things change, and the power needs out there is one of the big components with this, because this will be a green mill at the very start, moving into a kiln cogen related mill, and that allows them to treat hemlock a certain way that makes it more structurally sound and more viable, and a very good building component, and that requires some power upgrades. So what we've learned, as Colleen knows, we learned that we have a problem with the power grid that needs to be expanded for that, and so we have been working with the PUD. We've been working with the county, talking to them even before this. I got to give a shout out to Randy Johnson, who had some conversations with Rob. Randy, as folks may recall, was the CEO of Green Crow Timber. They also had a mill in Port Angeles, a mill in New Zealand. Disclosure, I was on his board of directors for about 7 or 8 years. And so he was like, okay, hey kid, here's some things you need to know. These guys really got their act together. They've got a good model, which is really great and reassuring. Though I can say Rob is really good to talk to. You leave feeling really confident, understanding what they're doing, which has been for me doing more policy than what piece of equipment goes where, has been really helpful. And so we're going to be going to the County Opportunity Board for that assistance in that. And it's everything from doing the PUD portion is a significant portion of what we're going to ask for the grant for. But there are some things we have to do out in the building. The one that makes me chuckle or snicker is we had fiberglass insulation. Anybody who's a contractor, I'm a contractor's kid. That stuff is miserable to put up. However, a group of birds apparently have been using it for nest building around the industrial park. So there are some chicks out there that are pretty tough, is all I'm going to say, if that was their nesting material, fiberglass.
Pink fiberglass.
Right? Yeah, you're just like, wow, okay, that's a
Boy
whole
birds may not like their home.
right. Yeah. makes you want to flee the nest a lot quicker is what, and then on recompete side of things, one of the things the city, with the NODC, North Olympic Development Council, was a recipient of was a component ad staffing to try to work with employers. That allowed us to bring on a person from internally, Nick Diaz, and Nick is the Assistant Community Economic Development Planner. And Nick has been a godsend because he's the one actually looking at something that Rob asked about yesterday that allows me to do other things, and will continue to work with employers and employees in the recompete fashion. But this is a significant portion of our recompete goal being coming to fruition here once we get everything signed. I am a little superstitious, so I knock on wood a lot more than probably most. There are some things with the lease. The lease allows Riverside a right of first refusal and first offer on unleased properties. So as they grow, the opportunity to grow out there at the site is equally important. NREC then is also a big component of this. That was another EDA, I guess, addition to recompete. I mean, recompete's here, and this other EDA is attached but not attached. So you can explain that better than I just did. But
we applied for funding and they didn't give funding towards job creation generally. So we applied through another avenue, Public Works Economic Adjustment Assistance, not the recompete program, and got funding that way.
And the city of Forks is a recipient of a $300,000 grant with a $100,000 match. Clown County is providing a significant portion of that match. The city, 80,000. We're providing 20. That's going to look at industrial components in the West End, and then also there is a industrial synergy component, another component. I mentioned both of those to Rob yesterday, Colleen, so he's very excited to talk with you and see, because those things help any company grow. Having had experience before with our former shake mills where they had a waste product and how do you get rid of that, or else they have to close the mill down, those type of things become very, very vital to how groups operate and how they function. And so I think there's some opportunities there as well. So that is what we're working on, where the lease date will start the 1st of August. We're trying to get all the paperwork together. It might get signed a day or two after that, but we're pretty close on that. A couple more meetings today I have, and I think Rob's looking over some things as well. And again, a huge shout out to them and to his uncle Avatar, who he went into business with in 1995 and started in the lumber business in 1995. So 30 years that he's been doing this with a family-owned operation. And I know that we've rescheduled meetings and all, so everybody could go do weddings and graduations and things like that. So that concept of family is pretty important to them, which is great to hear. So that was a lot. That's the fire hose.
Yeah. Well, so just yesterday, and Randy's on, maybe he can talk to it a little bit. I saw Matthias from the PUD is on as well, but so it kind of went under the radar to some degree, but it was the PUD commissioners and their staff, the county commissioners and Bruce Emery and the Port of Port Angeles commissioners and our staff all met at the county courthouse and talked about, economic opportunities for the West End and for, Port Angeles and the UGA, and what can we do and what are the opportunities and the challenges. And if you have time to go back and listen to it, it was an eye-opening, thoughtful discussion, but so much of it revolves around power and resiliency of power and reliability and the capacity that the PUD has and the city of Port Angeles has, and basically lost a lot of their capacity when they just went through this latest round of BPA negotiations, because it's kind of a use it or lose it. I don't know if that's a fair characterization, but since McKinley shut down and they used to use about 42 megawatts of power, I think. And I know Paul's on too. Paul, you could correct me if I'm getting some of these details wrong, but it's about that. And so their power capacity that they have is based on what their current load was when they negotiated. And so the load had gone down. So what they get to receive has dropped in half and was reallocated to Wyoming. So that makes it really challenging for our communities to support power at tier one rates. So that's important. Tier one are lower rates. Tier two is market, and it can go up and it can go down. It's much less predictable, which concerns businesses if their, rates go up and down. And so, businesses need, they're doing millions of dollars of investment. They need predictability.
Yeah.
And, they can't get shut down for, a day at a time or something. And so they need that reliability. And so with that, Paul or Randy, do you guys want to add anything to our discussion that we had yesterday? Doesn't sound like it.
Okay, well, they're on. I don't know if they heard, but I gave a shout out to Randy. Also, Mike French with been very involved, asking about the status of things, where we can, where the county can help. So we've had that, and then Paul, I gave a shout out to you, Kayla and Catherine. I see they're all on, but also some of your staff that were the folks, the engineering folks, and all that have come and answered the strangest questions. And I give Rob credit for putting up with the bald fat man in Forks, trying to figure out what he's talking about, because there are times I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so he's been pretty good about that. A remand plant was the one that this morning I'm like, okay, what does that exactly mean? And so that was worth,
That's an attorney trying to jump into an engineer's world.
Oh, or yeah, I mean, yeah, I see Kitchell giggling because this has been going on for 31 years. I like the policy portion better. And you talked about predictability. And so one of the other items that I had on the list, and when we transition to it, I'm gonna make this really clear. Predictability is vital not only for things like power and utilities and zoning. Predictability is, I won't use Forks vernacular, pretty bloody important when you come about supply. And in this case, timber supply. And that has been an issue. A group of us on this call, I see very familiar faces, have been dealing with for decades, both at the Department of Natural Resources level, but also dealing with regulations on the private side. And Forest and Fish was a monumental historic agreement on the private side that set rules and regulations and standards that have been in place, and some adaptive modification occurs as a result of some processes within that. The timber TFW, anyway, it's not coming to me, but those help with predictability. We have a thing before the Forest Practices Board. They're doing a hearing on the 4th of August in Port Angeles. The city council here had a resolution opposing the NP rule. And this is for, I want to get it right. I don't have that in front of me. I'll have to grab it here.
N means fish. P means
non-perennial.
okay.
I had, if you saw my desk, there's a wave of stuff here on it. I'll just pull it up. But this rule will remove about 15,000 acres from active forest management on the private side here, just on the North Olympic Peninsula, possibly more. It's very tightly associated with a regulatory process that had started over a year ago. It's been actually in the background for quite some time, but it kind of raised its head. And one of the issues that has arisen is that there is an impact not only on timber, but on ag with some of what they're talking about. And the agencies involved are being asked by, our city council passed a resolution opposing the current rule. And
Proposed rule. Opposing the proposed rule, right?
Yeah, the proposed rule. And it's to create no harvest buffers along non-fish perennial stream bases, non-fish perennial stream, NP, stream basins. And this is at the top portion of any such thing. And so that's a huge issue. The resolution the council adopted urges the Forest Practice Board to send it back to the agencies. There are indications the impact by Mason Gerard and the University of Washington's Mason Bruce Gerard, I missed a name in there. University of Washington's Spatial Informatics Group, along with the Washington Family Forest Association, that this could have a $1 to $1.8 billion impact. So that, that is the type of thing that creates uncertainty. Uncertainty in some of these areas is constant continuing uncertainty is a challenge and is adverse to the ability to grow economies. And so that's another thing that we're going to talk about.
And the EDC also, the board voted to approve a letter expressing concerns in the process that they took for this NP rule. But I saw Paul had his hand raised. Paul, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I did have my hand raised, and I'm happy to add any color to the discussions once I get off the phone. I had to take this phone call in the meantime, so my apologies.
Okay. Okay. Sure. So I saw a question in the chat with Paul Gottlieb. He asked, what information do you have that makes you confident Riverside will succeed when other wood products companies have been failing? And secondly, why does Forks, according to Sheriff Brian King, not participate in gathering of crime statistics for the state's database? That makes one curious about the crime situation in Forks.
Well, and the latter one I heard about, went over and asked the chief and the records clerk, and they're like, well,
I called Rod after our call with
and
Brian
I'm like,
King, and I
they
said,
go, well,
hey,
just
why
so
aren't
you
you
know,
doing this?
the last year, the number of reportable crimes was a few. I think he said it was a number less than 5. I don't remember it. They were looking into it. The impression I got is that there was a report missed that should have been turned in, is what I believe. So the fact that we don't gather statistics is wrong. We gather statistics. Apparently we may not have reported a statistic. And so, thanks, Paul. As to the other thing, I think I laid out a pretty good case that Riverside Forest Products has been operating in Surrey, Canada for 20 years, and Rob has been operating mills for 30 years. So they're wanting to open a second mill in the United States. There are no guarantees in life. Paul, you and I both know that, coming with the age. But I think they have a good business sense. We had them, I take a lot of faith in some of what I call the timber caucus here, and they've had pretty good interactions with Rob before this effort. Others went out and helped us understand who Riverside was, as much as they were understanding who the city of Forks was, right? And I feel as confident as we can that they've got the wherewithal to make this happen. And government can't guarantee what the private sector will do. That's the interesting thing about the private sector, right? But we can work with them and try to continue or restore a long history of timber utilization and manufacturing into lumber here on the West End.
Well, I think the other thing too is that you had Interfor and Allen Mill Logging operating there, and I don't know exactly how many million board feet they produced annually, but it was a significant number. And yes, they had problems with supply when they were producing the amount that they were producing. I know Interfor produces about 205 million board feet annually. And I would venture to say they did that or more in the Forks area. And so since they closed, that went down to 0.
Right.
And so there is capacity, volume available that is not competitive with Interfor, it's better to have a local, in that wood basket in the Forks area, have a processor there.
And there's also there's some other aspects of this that maybe some of the folks listening don't understand. But when you have to long haul logs, and diesel is over $4 a gallon, you start having a point where certain logs are no longer marketable because the nearest mill is 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 or 4 hours away. And so that becomes really vital. And one of the projects in Recompete that was funded was the barge process, the spud barge project from the Port of Port Angeles. Catherine, she did a presentation where a few of us are like, what the bloody heck is that about? Very, very, this ain't gonna work out here. And when you get done listening to the presentation, you're like, oh my God, this is one of the coolest triple wins potentially, because the truckers still have to make the haul of the log, but they might only be making hauls 30 minutes away, not 3 hours away. And that allows more viability for thinning operations, which is always a challenge to make those pencil. It allows opportunities for utilization here or in Port Angeles a little quicker or elsewhere. So, I mean, those are all components to this that really are vital to making a mill work and operable. So,
So I see Roy has his hand up. Roy?
Thank you. I was on a Washington Forest Product Roundtable call last week where McCaw Chairman TJ Green talked about they've got 23,000 acres that's more old growth and sort of cultural kind of set aside, and 10,000 acres that they'd like to put in production sort of when the market allows for it. And the predominant wood species, as you know, is Western hemlock. So one of the observations TJ made was when the going is good, when the market is favorable, really their only go-to big mill operator is Interfor. So I'm thinking if Riverside is coming to Forks, if they're adding a kiln to do some treating of the Western hemlock, that probably becomes one more piece of the bigger puzzle. Yep. that can also enhance sort of some of the objectives that the McCaw have. I mean, could you kind of address a little bit of that and what you've heard from the Riverside team and sort of how that all fits together, Rod?
Yeah, so Riverside, Roy, thanks. Hemlock is a very prolific species. You don't plant hemlock usually or replant hemlock, it plants itself. And it needs to be kiln dried. Interfor used to do that at the Forks site. I want to make a comment about Interfor, and I mean, they're a great company. And at the Forks site, before it closed, it had one of the highest production levels for a mill, both in relationship to outflows and in relationship to labor and also to cost. They closed because the value at that point in time, the value of the log coming into the sawmill was actually worth more than the lumber going out. And they were going to do some upgrades to try to reduce that, make it even more efficient. And those loans and investments weren't forthcoming, as I recall the conversations back then. But in this situation, Rob and his team, they're already having some interactions with discussions with Orca. They have a consultant they're working with to get their permits for the cogeneration component and the kiln component of what they want the mill to become. So they're going to be working at a fevered pace to build the mill and then work through that permitting process, which a lumber mill is permitted outright in the Forks Industrial Park. However, there are still permits that they have to get from other agencies. The Olympic Regional Clean Air Agency is one of those. and with cogen and those components that would then make the kiln very, very viable. What's important about that is a lot of the commercial thinning efforts are usually dealing with hemlock as a species, as well as these other lands where hemlock is the prime part on the landscape. And that then allows a purchaser that is local in close proximity to where those stands are to utilize that portion of the wood basket. And the landowner receives some financial benefit from that, and a product being created that results in, 40 to 70 jobs in an area where that median income is $46,300 a year. So, Roy, I mean, that's really vital for not just TJ Green, who is an amazing individual up at the Macaw, but also EFM, Bettina von Hagen and her group, and some of the other landowners that are here, that are still here, that are needing those, that market opportunity that right now may not pencil when they're trying to put up acreage for sale. Hope that got the answer you wanted.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not seeing any glares from 2 or 3 of the people I would be expecting if I got it wrong. So I think I did better there than I realized. Yeah, it's just a really cool opportunity. We've got a lot of things to do. I don't want to lose sight of that. Colleen's like, oh, you should celebrate. I'm like, I'll celebrate when Rob's running at full production, and we've got everything he needs done on his end. Everything on our end needs to be done, and that's when you celebrate. But it's a pretty good opportunity here. We're really grateful. I know the mayor's been a driver in this. He's constantly like checking in, like, what's the status, what do we need, and same with our council. So that's been great. And again, that partnership with the EDC, the port, the county, and some of the other folks who have come along to offer help and advice has been greatly appreciated. And then that resolution on that 4 August hearing in Port Angeles about the NP buffer rule, our resolution, the council's resolution, was passed Monday night, and it really asks that it's opposed to the proposed rule CR 102, and then also request the Forest Practice Board reject that, remand it back to the agencies for further review and refinement, because that impact of 15,000 acres and the valuations there are pretty huge. It's about 200,000 acres across the state. And a significant portion of that may end up being on small family farms as well. So that's another area of reason to be concerned about that proposed rule. Advantage of the push to bring foreign business investment. Paul, I know Riverside has been in discussions with the different folks on what funding mechanisms are out there as a result of some of the administration's pushes in this. One group, oh my Lord, one group I didn't say, Colleen, you and I are going to get a nasty gram from Monica, is the governor. The governor's office and has been really amazing here in a couple ways. Governor Ferguson, first of all, on the Upper Howe Road, came through with a way to get the Upper Howe Road reopened using a thing called the Strategic Reserve Fund. And those of us who attended that meeting, watching Governor Ferguson walk in, say, here's what my staff and I have been worried about for 2-3 days. Here's what we think a solution is, was the leadership I think anybody with a problem would like to see on the screen or in person. We also had some things with that PUD need that we went and approached the Strategic Reserve Fund. Now, Strategic Reserve Fund is monies that are a result of people not claiming their lottery winnings. So any of you who missed out claiming your $1 million win, that goes in the Strategic Reserve Fund. And those funds can be utilized for, I'm going to say, economic discussion about economic development And so Colleen, working with Riverside, EDC Colleen, working with Riverside, applied to the Strategic Reserve Fund saying, can we do this PUD project? There are rules about it can't be used for labor and like real property investment, like land investment type activities, but it could be used to buy equipment and materials needed. And so here there is a need to be more efficient with energy utilization. And Riverside had a list of LED lighting needs it needed to replace what was built in 1994. And also to do what we call power, what I'm calling power islands, which is the internal power components in a modern, more efficient manner. And the Strategic Reserve Fund folks said, yeah, that could be done. Now, here was the kicker. We had applied in April. These modifications in March had come up, and we finally work out what can be utilized. I'm going to say around the 1st or 5th of June. All the monies have to be spent by the 30th of June. So Riverside went out and acquired the equipment that could be matched with these funds, worked with Colleen on that, and by the end of June, we were able to utilize those in vital investment that we received with the help of Governor Ferguson and his staff. So huge shout out on that. That was a key component of this. One of the things we are putting out to bid. We're going to have the city's going to have, so you need to be on the state roster, MRSC roster. We got some bid work. We're coming up with electricians. I'm looking at my door because Nick would be standing there helping me go through the list of things. Electricians. We've got some work doing with floors, that insulation, spray foam insulation. We've got a couple other roof repair and building repair items on that list that are going to be put out to local contractors. And if we're successful in getting the loan needed from the Opportunity Fund, then we'll be able to have that work done here by the end of the year. So that'll be another investment of some funding into the local community as well. So hopefully I got that. And I think, sorry we didn't add that right off the bat, Monica. That's my mistake. I apologize. So what else do we have here? Cogen, it's Clown Bay Community and OCC. I know it was talked about, Phil. There was a lot of effort in that, and then it just kind of flatlined. It'll be interesting, whether as part of, the Climate Commitment Act dollars. That to me would be a great example of utilizing climate commitment dollars to reduce costs and provide a way of generating power. And have an emergency backup power for our 2 institutional facilities here. I believe, I would argue, this is Rod personally, that Governor Ferguson has a greater sense of the needs in rural Washington because he understands that rural isn't just Woodinville, and it's places that are actually rural. So I think, those are things we'll see more of, investments like things like that. What else do we need? Some public education. Preach, James, preach. PABA and Chamber talking about the Timber Summit. That would be awesome. A few of us would love to be in the audience, if not on the panel.
I sent to James that, the EDC started up a 501c3 that is called the Natural Resources Innovation Center. We've got the 12 projects around natural resources that we have where we're doing studies to see what's viable and innovative, sustainable, using industrial symbiosis, that kind of thing. And we're meeting with a bunch of investors in that space. So I want to make sure that that's a component of any education process. We've got some great people on our board that are in the timber industry that are guiding us. So yeah, want to make sure that that's a heavy component of any summit that's put together.
And so let me try, I'm going to try this. And so I'm going to look at I won't refer to them as the timber barons on this, but the timber guys, you will quickly tell me if I'm wrong. But Micah asked a question about don't know enough about lumber to know why stabilized hemlock does well. Hemlock, you want to kiln dry it to ensure its structural integrity. It hardens. I'm going to say hardens by removing the moisture out of hemlock. That creates a much more stabilized board, and it also adds strength to it. It reduces the ability to twist and split. It improves that, not only that strength and stiffness, but it also enhances its resistance to disease and insects. So that's a pretty big need with hemlock, and that is a predominant. I think I can say predominant species. Now I'm going to look and see, did I get the glare from Kitchell? Did I get the glare from Grant? Did I get the glare?
Yeah, I know the
Rand?
Macaw tribe said 80% of their forest are hemlock, western coastal hemlock, which is different from hemlock in, say, more inland area. There's a lot fewer rings per inch than there are because it grows so fast. But there's also the opportunity for them to sell to the CRTC, and if there's a spinoff, or if the CRTC starts manufacturing in bulk some of the products that they've been working on with DoD or ADUs, then that would definitely be a market pull source as well, outside of just the commodity market.
And I think, Micah, one, I will say none of the three people I referenced hit their hand to their forehead like, oh God, the kid went off script again. So I feel pretty comfortable there. But this is I wouldn't say this is a new supply. This is a supply that was being utilized until 2015, and it is still utilized, but it has to be trucked out, and there is is it the law of diminishing returns? If your costs to truck it out are such that the profit is so marginal, then you may not utilize that material. God, I hope Doc Underwood is like, good, I'm gonna have to reschool the kid. But so this would be able to utilize that product that in the past had been utilized, that may not be utilized or may not be managed that way. That then creates some challenges for the timber manager, because they have to then start figuring out what they do to modify their stands over the coming decades if that material can't be removed, or if it has to be removed and left near the landing. That's it's great for firewood people, but it's not necessarily great for jobs. And then having the opportunity to do the manufacturing of taking the raw log and manufacturing and adding value added before it leaves our area increases those jobs and opportunities. And again, restoring that 40 to 70 jobs with that pretty significant wage that Rob and his team are working on making happen here. So I hope that helped answer the question. And short haul, the CBC and OCC using hemlock for cogeneration, which is a sustainable way to have green energy. And we have an example of that. Herman Brothers provides materials that the school district here in Fleet Valley School District has, that replaced a diesel generator, fire generator, with a wood burning heat plant that produces heat to our newer high school. It was new back then, but it isn't now. The years catch up with us. What else did we miss here? Are there other questions out there?
No, it doesn't look like it.
I will say we are in full tourism season as well. So don't think you're just going to drive out to the West End and find a hotel. It's been pretty remarkable. Lissy, so we'll talk about that sector. Lissy noted that the visitor counts for the last 3 months are the highest for that month in 20 some years. So, and Last
Great.
year was a record year, so we'll see how that plays out. Explain what trust lands are in 7 minutes, Kitchell asked. Okay, well, the Department of Natural Resources has a series of lands that they manage for both the state institutions. Those are called federal forest grant lands. And the proceeds of which goes to things like operating prisons, running colleges, universities, managing the capital itself was part of that. That was part of our statehood gift from the federal government to the state. And then there were a series of lands that in the 1930s, timber companies didn't want to have to replant the lands. And so they basically forfeited the lands for failure to pay taxes. And counties like Clown had a large number of those forfeits in their area. They tried managing these on their own during the Depression and eventually were convinced to turn them over to the state forest board, was what it was called back then. So we call these forest board transfer lands, or a group of us do. They might also be called state forest lands now because Bruce Mackey and Goldmark thought that would be a better name. We'll let that go. And those are trust lands managed on behalf of the county recipients. The proceeds of those sales and the revenues from those flow to the special purpose districts, sometimes called junior taxing districts. And junior taxing districts are your schools, your hospitals, your port, your library. They could be a park and rec district. They can be a metropolitan park district. They can be, in other parts of the state, they're cemetery districts and things like that. And those monies flow from the sales and the same distribution as property taxes are distributed. And so those become vital for special projects. That for fire districts, they could be essential for operations or meeting equipment needs. And so those are a significant issue. And we have I've been with the city of Forks almost 31 years, but I was working on these issues 4 or 5 years before when I was the vice chair for the King County Democrats Legislative Committee. And I was one of the ones saying we should cut trees because they're renewable. And they can provide opportunities, jobs, power, and a lot of other benefits to the environment. So, Paul, still curious about opportunities for interest? I don't know, Paul. Right now I'm working on Rob to get a lease. Rob and I are working on those details. Given the state's $1 billion revenue short, is there anyone looking at our trust lands as an essential revenue source? I think there's a group. What's interesting is there is a group in the legislature, Democrat and Republican, who understand that those are revenues that are essential not only to the local economy but also to the state. We will see. We have new administrations all the way around the table, right? Except for the superintendent of public instruction, and so Chris Reichel, but otherwise everybody's coming to the table with some new expectations. A healthy timber managed stand does a lot of things. You see that by EFM purchasing Rainier. So the Rainier lands that were here on the West End. What else? Trying to see if I'm not getting glares from some folks. I must be doing okay. So.
All right. Well, it is 8:57, Rod. So
wow.
It's probably see how quick that went?
That went by fast. And again, shout out to Riverside Forest Products USA, Rob Soai and George Kovac. They've been, we're working really hard with them and their team. Hopefully we get all that finalized here shortly. And to the port, the EDC, and the county, thank you as well. We are very
grateful. Yep.
Yep.
I think, what
NLDC
I've seen is
others,
a difference. What I've seen in a difference in the last few years is the real willingness of our government stakeholders and community to come together for projects with recompete, with helping Forks win and, get something done. It's been fun and just so nice that everyone's not siloed into their own work areas, but working together. We get a lot more federal, state funding when we have projects that are where we've got, full community county support.
Yeah, and I mean, we have also, seen the legislative support, people interested in this project here in Forks, interested in Riverside. Congresswoman Emily Randall was on the site looking at what we were talking about. We had Rob couldn't be there. I think that was a graduation for someone in his family. So he's on a cell phone. So Kitchell, thinking back to technology days, he's in Canada on cell phone talking to a congresswoman standing at the Forks Industrial Park. So some of those technology efforts we undertook decades ago are still being utilized and fruition and helpful. So, and there's a want there too to help. I mean, so we've got some work to do, but Riverside Forest Products USA, welcome, and hopefully in a few months, when everybody's got their feet feeling a little more firm as we get everything together, I'm sure Rob and George and Rob, Avtar, and George would be great people to have a conversation with. Folks are, I think, going to enjoy their spirit, enjoy their practicalness, and interest in this part of the world.
Okay. Well, with that, everyone, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for the great questions. We will, Mitch, who are we having on next week?
You're going to have a presentation from the Clallam County Fair folks, Donald
great. That's
Crawford
right.
and Angie Bronson.
Okay, terrific. So we'll have info on the fair next week, and this will be up on our website later today if anyone wants to share it. It's easy to do through YouTube links. So thanks so much for joining us, Rod, and everybody that's such an important part of our community. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
All right, take
Bye.
care, folks.